Hello?
Hey, Michael, it's Dennis from the Australian Rock Show. How are you?
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
Look, I'm very well. Wonderful to have you on the show today. And might I add, it's a good time to be a Stryper fan if you live in Australia, because following on from the band's tour last year, you've got some upcoming solo shows set for November, which I know many fans here are looking forward to. An obvious question first up is, what can diehard fans expect from you on these acoustic shows?
Well, it's going to be very different, obviously, from the Stryper set. You know, I'm coming with just my acoustic guitar, and I've got a little looper that I track a rhythm guitar on, and then I play solo over it. And then I've got a little drum box on some songs. And I'm going to be comprising a very different set list, you know, for people, very unique, specifically for Australia. And, you know, doing some of the classic songs, obviously Stryper, solo, some Sweet and Lynch songs, and Boston songs. But I'll also be throwing in and sprinkling in some, you know, unexpected curveballs along the way as well.
I will run through the dates and ticket info at the end of this show. But Michael, we kicked off this show with something off your album One-Sided War from 3 years back, a favourite of mine called Comfort Zone. That was by far, in my opinion, your heaviest solo album you've released. I've always enjoyed your solo material because it sees you branching out and trying different things, stepping outside the yellow and black borders, if you will.
Absolutely. And I mean, you know, with Stryper, at least we feel the need to stay within the boundaries a little bit more and, you know, not venture too far away from that. When I do solo albums, I can pretty much, for the most part, do whatever I want to do. You know, and I've done that. I think I've proven that on, you know, if you go back to the first solo album, you know, that was more of an arena rock kind of thing. And then Real was more acoustic based. Truth was very eclectic and, I don't want to say psychedelic, but certainly a little deeper. And then you've got One-Sided War that is just straight ahead hard rock / metal album with some different things along the way. And then I've got the new album 10 coming out, which is a really great follow-up to One-Sided War, similar, but taking it up a notch or two in the sense that I've got a different guitar player on every track and some really big names, Gus G., Jeff Loomis of Arch Enemy, Andy James, Rich Ward of Fozzy, Joel Hoekstra, you know, lots of really incredible guitar players on this album.
You know, you've always been a prolific songwriter with the bulk of Stryper's material penned by yourself. How does your songwriting process differ from Michael Sweet in 1984, say, as a 21-year-old to 2019?
Oh, gosh, that's a great question. You know, back in the 80s, I think I spent more time on songs. Some might see that as a good thing, or some might see that as a bad thing. But I know that I would spend maybe, you know, 2 or 3 days on a song and just kind of dissect it. And sometimes I'd get more frustrated over that. Nowadays, I sit down when I write an album, it's pretty much a song a day. I'll get a groove going, I'll get a riff going with that groove, and then it just blossoms and flourishes from there. And 3-4 hours later, I've got a song, you know, and then I'll take a break. Next day, start on it again. And after 12 days, 13 days, I've got the whole album. You know, I didn't write albums like that in the past. It was spread out over a much more, a greater length of time, you know, a 2 or 3 or 4 month process instead of just a few weeks.
Okay, you know, it's hard to believe, but 30 years ago, I saw you with Stryper in Sydney on the In God We Trust tour, and 2 years prior to that, in 87, in support of To Hell With the Devil. That first tour in particular got a lot of mainstream media coverage on TV and in print, some in-store appearances as well. My question is, back in the mid-80s, with the exception of, say, I can think of Maiden, Twisted Sister and Dio, Australia was not on the touring map for heavy metal bands. What prompted Stryper to tour in 87? And I'm guessing you have fond memories of that first Australian visit?
Well, first I have to say, since you're dating yourself, that you're old too, right?
I don't look it, though.
There you go. Music keeps us young.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
You know, I tell you what, we had the opportunity to come, and you know, a gentleman reached out to us, a promoter at the time, David, and he said, I want to bring you to Australia, and it worked out, and we were able to go to Australia. And then the icing on the cake was the fact that we had a lot of fans in Australia. great turnouts and people that wanted to see the band and wanted to hear the band in a live setting. So we were very blessed out of the box. Now, after our 3 times to Australia, we broke up, went our separate ways, and then it had been years since we came back. And now we've not only been back, but here I am coming back a little over a year later after Stryper was just recently there, and it really is incredible. And I hope to continue this tradition. I hope that we can keep coming back every few years to Australia because there's so many fans there, and it's so great to be able to come and spend some time with the fans.
Last week we had Scott Gorham on the show, and we were looking over some of Thin Lizzy's producers and what they brought to the records. This makes me want to ask about 1985's Soldiers Under Command album, which had Michael Wagener on board, and then you brought in Stephan Galfas for To Hell with the Devil. What prompted the change in producers? Were you seeking, I guess, a commercial, less metal sound?
Yeah, we were back, especially in those times. We were always trying something new. Now, that can be a really risky thing to do. But also it can be very gratifying if you do it right. And specifically, especially back in the 80s, we were doing that. So, we worked with Ron Gowdy on the first album, co-produced, and then we worked with Michael Wagener, obviously, who was like, a really brilliant established metal producer. And then after that album, Soldiers, we wanted to kind of take it up a notch. Not that Michael couldn't do that, but we wanted to branch out and work with someone that had done some different things and not necessarily just metal. So we wound up working with Stephan Galfas, and we co-produced that album. And it wound up being our biggest album. So it was risky, but it was a good call.
We're going to close out this show with the title track from 1985's Soldiers Under Command, co-written, I believe, by yourself and Robert. Very much a song which defines who the band were at that time. What's the history behind the song Soldiers Under Command? And I guess, was it written specifically for that record?
It was written specifically for that record. We had been playing a number of those songs out in public for quite a while before we recorded them. So when we went in to record with Michael Wagener, we wound up just banging those songs out. Robert tracked the drums in a day and a night. We tracked the guitars in a few days, bass in a few days, and then background vocals in a day and lead vocals in a few days, and then it got mixed. So it was a very quick process because we knew what we were doing. And I remember Michael Wagener just kind of smiling through it all and saying, after we'd do a take, he'd say, yeah, perfect. I don't know what else to say. That's great. And it just really went well. And the song itself, Soldiers Under Command, has a little bit of a Judas Priest vibe to it. We're huge Judas Priest fans, especially me. Judas Priest really changed my life musically. Priest and Van Halen, those two bands. And I think you hear flavors of that in that song in particular. And, it was just a great opportunity. And then lyrically, it's talking about how we are soldiers under God's command. It kind of lays out what Stryper is all about in the lyrics.
I do wish to mention your stunning biography from 2014, and I thought my brother, when reviewing Honestly My Life and Stryper Revealed, summed it up quite accurately by stating, rock fans will no doubt relish the tell-all account of Stryper's rise and fall and rise again, yet it's the depiction of Sweet's frailties, strengths and struggles that makes his a human interest story which the reader can not only relate to, but also empathise with.
Well, man, I've many times over said if I ever write a book, I want it to be very heartfelt and brutally honest. And sometimes, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I'll be reading a book and I just get the sense that it's not completely honest. It's a little far-fetched or over the top. And, I wanted to make sure that I was speaking from the heart and good or bad, positive or negative, that it was exactly what happened and exactly what I went through and how I felt. And that's what I did in this book. And, I had some people that came back to me and said, wow, I lost some respect for you because I never imagined the fact that you drank or you smoked or you swore, or you did this, or you did that. And I said, I just would respond to them saying, well, would you have preferred me to lie? And see, I don't want to, when my chapter's done and I leave this earth, I don't want to go down in the books as someone that was dishonest. I want to go down in the books as someone that was very honest and an open book. And that's what I really wanted to present in Honestly.
I think you did that and did it very, very well. But that leads me on to a next question. You know, books regularly get made into movies, not specifically your story there, but I've always been curious, has there ever been any official movie offers to get Stryper's groundbreaking story down on film? I mean, surely the band and their legacy are deserving of that.
We've had a few offers over the years, and, you know, not to be rude or snarky, but they weren't the right type of offers, you know? And I don't mean that financially speaking. I just mean if we're going to do a movie someday, it's got to be done right, and it's got to be, complete quality. It can't be cheese whiz.
Now,
even though Stryper is a little cheesy sometimes.
Well, look, you've just finished up 3 months of US dates on Stryper's history tour. I know that Perry Richardson, to me, he really seems right at home. A couple of years in, he and Robert generate a really great sound.
Man, I can't go on enough about Perry. What he's brought to this band is hard to put into words. I think the first word that pops into my mind is the word peace. Mm-hmm. He's brought peace to the band, and that's long overdue. Long overdue. And we're just thrilled and blessed to have him. And then you add to that his incredible talents of playing bass and singing like a bird. And, he's just perfectly made and tailor-made for this band. And I've even said and gone on record as to say that, where was he, back in 1984? And that's not to take anything away from Tim. It's just that's the truth of the matter. We love having Perry in this band, and he's just so perfectly made for this band, and not just from his abilities, but his favorite color has always been yellow. His email has 3 sevens in it. And has for years. I mean, just there's a list a mile long of so many interesting things that I don't believe are coincidental.
Well, you mentioned the word peace. I mean, there's no point being in close quarters with bandmates for such a months on the road if there's no peace.
Yeah, you have to have fun and you have to enjoy what you're doing. And when you're not, it's time to reevaluate.
The band have always done some amazing interpretations of other artists' songs. Earth, Wind and Fire's Shining Star is a fantastic example, and I think that the covering album from 2011 really surprised a lot of people. My favourite track on there is UFO's Lights Out, and I've often wondered what led to the inclusion of that tune on the record.
Oh, that's interesting. That's actually my favourite song as well. I'm not just saying that. Yeah, it is. For so many reasons. I love the energy of it. And I'm a huge Michael Schenker fan. And that's all I listened to for years when I was growing up. I kind of morphed from Boston into, bands like Cheap Trick and Aerosmith. And then I really got into bands like Scorpions and UFO. Eventually moved on to Priest and Van Halen and Maiden and bands like that. But that being said, I love Michael. I think... he's one of the most highly rated guitar players, but also one of the most underrated guitar players. True. Which is, I don't even know if that's possible, but I believe that it is. And he's just iconic. And there's something so special about the way he plays and his delivery, his vibrato, his choice of notes. And I just love his style and always have. And to be able to cover Lights Out, one of my favorite UFO tracks of all time, it was just such a thrill.
Michael, you always seem to have a busy work schedule. That continues with Stryper headlining a big festival in Seoul, South Korea in early August, followed by a bunch of South American dates in September. The Australian dates are, of course, in November. What's the long-term plan for Michael Sweet going into 2020?
Oh, man. Well, the calendar's filled up for the next year. And I was always one to say, who knows what tomorrow will bring, but now we're booking a year in advance, and I know what tomorrow's bringing. But it's a blur. We're so busy in a good way. We're very happy for that. We're not sitting around twiddling our thumbs, wondering what to do next. We're very blessed and fortunate, and we thank God for it, thank our fans for it. And we're going to be working on a Stryper album end of this year, into next year. I got the new solo album coming out in October 10. We're working on a documentary over the next 2 to 3 years. It's going to take a long time. We want to do it right. And, there's probably other projects in the works. I'm going to be singing on a project with Tracy Guns, his solo project called Sunbomb. I start work on that in the next few weeks when I get back from Korea. And, there's just so much going on, man. But I count my blessings every day.
Lovely to chat with you, Michael. Every guest on our show gets to choose a song by an Australian band. What would you like to choose and why?
Oh, my gosh. Oh, wow. That's such a great question. And now I'm sitting here thinking of Australian bands. There's a song that somebody asked me to play at the shows coming up. You got to help me with the name of the band. The song is called "The War Is Over."
It's a Cold Chisel song. The band is called Cold Chisel. That the one
Cold Chisel.
That the one you want to play?
Let's play that one, because I might wind up actually playing that and performing that myself live. So I think that's a great one to do.
Thank you for your time today. Your music means a lot and touches the lives of so many. I look forward to seeing you on one of the Australian dates later in the year.
Thank you, my friend. God bless you, man. Looking forward to seeing you, and thanks for your time as well.